Okay, so for the first time this month, for the month of October, I'm going to be doing a book review. Well, I'm doing a dual book review. I haven't reviewed any books this month. I don't know why, but if you would like to see more reviews of books on this channel, please give this video a thumbs up, just for me to have an indicator as to how many people want to see book reviews. I don't know if that's what you guys want or not. If you do, then I'm happy to do it. If you don't, that's fine. We can do other things as well at the same time. Alright, so the two books I'm going to be reviewing for this dual book review are Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant. This is an adult horror, and Twilight by Stephanie Meyer. This is a YA fantasy. Alrighty, let's get right into the review. These are both going to be spoiler-free. With my spoiler-free reviews, I give you the name of the book, the author, the genre, the star rating, a premise, 3 pros, 3 cons, and my overall thoughts in wrapping up. So, let's get right into this. You will not be spoiled. Let's do this. We're going to start off today's dual review with this book, Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant, with a very graphic arm on the cover, but we'll let that go. This, not surprisingly with that arm, is an adult horror book, and I gave this book 3.5 stars. It's interesting because in my reading vlog, I said that I gave it 3 stars, and then I ummed and ahed over it to prepare for this review I was going to do, and realized, no, you know what? It does deserve more than 3 stars. But I'll get into all those reasons as we do go along. The basic premise of this book is that I found out recently this is book number 2 in a series, which surprises me because I'm not someone who usually will jump into a book 2 when I know there is a book 1, but I didn't know there was a book 1 till I finished it. So apparently in book 1 in this series, we have a girl who goes out with a crew on a ship somewhere, and all of the crew members on that ship die, and then in book number 2, her sister, who we follow, Tori, is going out there to find out why it is that they died. There are some suspicions going on and revolving around why these people died, but it's time to actually confirm this. So, with a crew of people who are incredibly sciencey, as well as some other members of the crew that are going to assist with the voyage and to be able to film everything so we have proof of what's going on, and assassins in case things go out of hand and whatever else. We are in for a really interesting ride. But there's a reason why I gave this book 3.5 stars instead of, say, 4 or 5 stars, and I'm going to go into them with you in a spoiler-free way. So my first spoiler-free con for Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant would have to be the way that the second half is written. I feel like the first half of the book and the second half of the book were written with a very different writing style choice. I felt like the first half of the book was written as a plot-driven first half, and the second half of the book was a character-driven first half, and this completely threw me off. So, okay, let me explain. The first half of the book, as I've already said with the premise, we have Tori and the crew going out and on a voyage to find out what the heck happened and why everyone died the first time that a crew went out to do this trip. And the anticipation and the build-up to finding out whatever it was that was responsible for everyone dying was done really well. And I think that was because it was plot driven. But the second half of the book suddenly became extremely character driven. We finally have the reason why the first crew all died show up. We have an antagonist, or we have multiple antagonists that show up. And once they do, it suddenly became very character-driven, to the point that we were so extremely, to use this term, zoomed in to our characters' thoughts and feelings and internal monologues that we weren't able to really appreciate what was going on outside of them. My second con for this book would have to be that the deaths that occur, I don't think it's a spoiler to say there are deaths that occur because it's a horror, the deaths that occurred seemed rather meaningless, and at the same time they were rather disrespected. So in the first half of the book, while it is plot driven, we do get to learn a lot about our characters. Please don't mistake me, I'm not saying it's character driven, because it's not. But we take time to learn more about the characters so that we can be more invested in them. We follow a large cast of characters. Not surprising when you have a horror, not surprising when you have a horror book and you assume that people are going to die, that we have a large cast of characters, because some people gotta die and some people gotta survive, right? So Anyway, if anyone survives, who knows? But anyway, once I got on board with the fact that we have a large cast of characters, I actually ended up having to write out their names and their occupations just to keep them straight so I knew who was who. But anyway, we got so invested in them that when they finally start dying off, because that happens late in the second half of the book, it really, there's no real period of mourning of, oh my god, so-and-so died, and this is terrible for this reason, and they won't be able to wear it. There was none of that. It was, oh my god, this person died, but we gotta run. So, I just didn't appreciate that. Maybe you do. Maybe you're someone who loves that sort of thing, but it just wasn't for me. My third and final spoiler-free con for this book would have to be that it was too sciencey for my liking. Okay, so this book, as I've said, is an adult horror, and yet I feel like it is more officially an adult horror sci-fi, because while there are horrific moments in the book, and while I do understand why it was marketed as a horror, it does make sense, there are so many moments that make it feel more like a sci-fi. These people who are on this ship, with the antagonists, the crew members who are sciencey have done a whole bunch of research, and they're continuing this research while they're going on this voyage and doing what it is they're doing, and everything becomes so sciencey focused that for a lot of the book, at least until the antagonist showed up, I kept thinking I'm reading a sci-fi, and then I had to remind myself, hang on, this is not a sci-fi, it's a freaking horror. For me, I'm someone who more prefers an adult horror that, if it's going to have a subgenre, will be a subgenre of a contemporary, because otherwise I'm going to find myself being too distracted. But there are several reasons why this book does deserve 3.5 stars as opposed to the 3 I was originally going to give it, or 2 or 1. The first spoiler-free pro that I have for this book is going to have to be that first half that was plot-driven. I really enjoyed this. It's kind of sad when you're reading a horror book when you're enjoying the lead-up to the horrific events that you know are coming, and then not enjoying the horrific events once they finally unfold. But to fully appreciate where I'm coming from with this book, I loved the lead up to it. And I really appreciated the anticipation of them getting to where they were going to go and making the discovery that they were going to make, and also anticipating what was going to happen if they were going to make it through or if they weren't, and the different reactions of the different people that are part of the crew, because they're all completely different. They all come from completely different backgrounds, so their dynamics were fantastic also. My second spoiler-free pro for this book would have to be ASL, deaf culture representation. This is a massive part for why this book is getting 3.5 stars as opposed to 3 stars. I love deaf representation in books. It does mean the world to me. So that got me really excited, thinking, oh my gosh, there's deaf culture represented. And there is. 2 of our characters are deaf. They are both sisters. There is a third sister who is their translator. And I just loved this. I loved this. Which leads into my third spoiler-free pro for this book, which is LGBTIQ+ representation, which I did not know was going to be the case. There is LGBTIQ+ FF representation in this book. And I really appreciated that. I absolutely loved the first half of this book. I felt let down with the reasons I've already said from the second half of the book. I do think that this book is worth the read. If you love character-driven books, then you're going to love the second half of the book a lot more than I did. So take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. But for me personally, 3.5 stars. So the next book I'm going to do a spoiler-free review on is this book, Twilight by Stephanie Meyer. This is a YA fantasy book, and I gave this book an overwhelming 5 stars. Okay, so the basic premise of this book is that it is a singular perspective, like Into the Dragon Deep, where it's multi-perspective and following like 10, 12 characters. This is a singular perspective. We are following a girl by the name of Bella Swan. You probably already know this story, but for those of you who don't. So we are following the perspective of a girl by the name of Bella Swan, whose mother and father are divorced, and they both live interstate from each other. Bella moves out of her mother's home when her mother gets a new boyfriend. This is explained very early on in chapter 1, so it's not a spoiler. And she moves into where her father lives, which is in Forks, and she goes to the school there. Not really someone who seems to love life at all, but She's just doing what she's doing, going with the flow, and that is until she gets into her first biology class, where she bumps into the very overly attractive, pale-faced boy, Edward Cullen, who is a boy that Bella just can't seem to get off her mind. She becomes very obsessed with him and can't really understand why. Then we come to find out that there is more to Edward than meets the eye. We find out relatively early on in the book that Edward is a vampire. We also come to find out that there are a lot of other beings in this world, and this just made this book a lot of fun for me. I gave this book an overwhelming 5 stars for so many reasons. Please keep in mind, both of these cons are very subjective. My first spoiler-free con for this book, Twilight by Stephanie Meyer, is the mortal moments. Now, what I mean by this is we are but we have so many different characters that are not human, that are special beings, basically. And then we have different characters that are mortal, standard human beings, and these include Bella's friends from the school. These moments bored me, I guess, because I just wanted to, be more focused on the moments she spends with Edward, and if you know the story, Edward and Jacob, the Cullen family, yada yada yada, rather than spending time with her friends or her dad or whatever, who there's nothing fantastical, as in fantasy, fantastical about them. And so it brought the book down a little bit for me. Not enough for me to give it less than 5 stars, but yeah, it bored me more than the rest of the book. My second spoiler-free con for this book is the way that Edward is a vampire is revealed in the book in comparison to how they did it in the film. I really appreciate the way they did in the film. I haven't seen the film since reading the book, so it's been a while, but I remember that they're in the woodsy, foresty area, and Edward just gets to the point where he says, "Say it, say what I am." And she goes, "Vampire." And it's just like, oh my god, all the goosebumps, right? In this book, it doesn't happen. In this book, it is so much more of an easier way to get to the point. So they're just talking about different things, and then Bella just goes, so Bella's saying all these things that she's worked out, going, well, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this, and he goes, oh, okay, so what am I? Oh, you're a vampire. Yeah, so da-da-da-da-da-da. And it just flows rather than it being a big deal. I loved the big reveal because I would think that in reality it would be a big deal. My first spoiler-free pro for Twilight by Stephanie Meyer would have to be the writing style. It is one of the most simplistic writing styles I've ever read. But I'm going to tell you why that is an absolute pro for me, because, classic books like I have up here, they have a beautiful, sometimes even lyrical or flowery writing style, which is great, and we can celebrate the different types of writing styles that there are. But for me personally, so again, it's a subjective opinion, for me personally, the more simplistic the writing style is, the less barriers that I need to overcome to just fall in love with the story and just be hooked into the story. Where if I'm reading nothing in Shakespeare, I appreciate what Shakespeare did, but if I'm reading thee, thy, thou, thou all the time, then I'm working so hard to get to the point, let alone try and follow the story of the book. Where because the writing style is so simplistic in Twilight by Stephanie Meyer, it makes it so easy to just feel enticed and so zoned into the book that for me, I felt like the plot just washed over me. It was like a wave that I was so happy to let drag me under and just allow me to fall into the book. So therefore, specifically, my second spoiler-free pro for this book is that it's very easy to get lost in, but lost in a good way. Not lost in as in I'm lost because the writing style was too hard, or I'm lost because the author is giving me way too much, or whatever. I'm getting lost in it because it's so easy for me to get through that I am not of this world when I'm reading this book. I am in this world. I'm literally there inside the world, and everything else has melted and disappeared. That is a massive pro, and that is one of the reasons why I do believe that just with time being the only barrier at the moment, Twilight will become a classic. It'll be considered a classic at some point. I know it will be, but It's just so easy for everything else around you while you're reading to melt away when you read this book. That's a massive pro. I haven't said that for a very long time, and that's why I needs to read New Moon, and I'm reading New Moon, as you guys know, in November, because I need more of this world. My third and final spoiler-free pro for Twilight by Stephanie Meyer is the world building. If there's one thing that I forgot, I had not read this book. I have read it many times, but I had not read this book in over 10 years. But one thing I forgot about this book is just how fantastic the world building is. Not only do we learn about vampires, we also learn about werewolves in this book. We also learn about werewolves and certain things to do with them, as well as learning how vampires are all different types of vampires. They're not a monolith, if that's the word. It's a word I don't use often. And some of them have different abilities. Some vampires hunt differently to others. Do we talk about the sparkle? If you know, you know. If you don't, you're not getting spoiled. If you want to talk about the sparkle, I actually liked it because this book's not a horror. I also appreciate what Stephanie Meyer did with this, with the sparkle, because it's different. I cannot give higher praise than say this book was so good, literally everything around me melted away and I was in this world while reading the book. That was just fantastic. But anyway, that is my dual review on Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant, an adult horror that I gave 3.5 stars to, and Twilight by Stephanie Meyer, a YA fantasy that I gave an overwhelming 5 stars to. But in the meantime, that is where I am going to leave it. Letting you guys go, peace, blessings, and so much love. I post videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I'll see you again soon. Mwah! Be kind and love one another.